Because of the way the universe is created, we each of us live in two worlds at the same time. We have to live in the outer life of our own bodies and the inner life of our own souls.
Hello and welcome to Living in the Inner Life. I'm Chris Sheridan and I've been studying consciousness and metaphysics, philosophy, psychology for a long time. And I want to share with you some interesting things that I've come across, practical things I've found to work in my life surrounding the inner life, because we do live two lives. We have this outer life with all the things that we do in the world, and we have this world within, the inner life, the infinite within. And it is just as vast as the infinite cosmos out there, this world we have in here. So, to that, I was thinking today about what I could do for a topic on this podcast, and I found myself having a hard time making a decision, so I decided to do this podcast on indecision. How to overcome indecision, how to become more decisive. Okay? The great Yogi Berra once said, if you find a fork in the road, take it. Of course, he doesn't go on to say which one you take, and that's the part of the joke that makes it funny. Now, it can sometimes be not funny when we're stuck in trying to make a decision, when the options are either equally weighed, or they're equally bad, or we're concerned about the consequences. A lot goes into being indecisive or having difficulty making a clear decision. All right. Some of that may have to do with the word itself, decide. Okay. The D part means like decommission, where you take a boat out of the water, or desalinization, where you take the salt out of the water, or to deconstruct. You take something that's built and you tear it apart. And the side part has to do with cut. And it's also the same word that we use for suicide, homicide, pesticide, insecticide. Really, in usage, it means to kill. So you're talking about getting rid of something and killing something. And now you have to make a decision, all right? So that can make it hard, because it can feel like we're killing something off. If you have three choices and have to make one decision, in a sense, you're cutting that one away from the other two, and you're throwing those other two away. Because when you make a decision, usually it's one choice, one option that gets picked over the rest. But what if you like the other options? That can be very difficult, and we can really get in this mode where we're stuck in indecision. Okay? Now, decision has a lot to do with confidence. If you're able to make a decision and being decisive, that means you have some confidence in what it is you want, your values. Maybe you've thought it through. You have an individual sense of personal power, and I decide which one. Could be at a restaurant. Or you can sit there and look at the menu and go, I don't know, this shrimp scampi looks good, but, well, I don't know, maybe I kind of feel like a burger today. It can go on and on and on, especially if there's more choices. Okay, there are many factors that go into making a decision. Okay, and it is a process. But one of the factors that go into it would be the amount of choices that you have. If there are so many choices, it may be harder to decide which one to make, because each one might appeal to a different part of you. Well, I like this, but it doesn't have that. Oh, I like that one, but it doesn't have this. And what am I going to do? All right, then you're stuck in indecision. Another factor that goes into decision making is the amount of time that you have. And a lot of times, if you have more time to think about something, to come up with this decision, you can actually make it harder on yourself, because you can overthink something. You know anybody like that who overthinks things? I certainly don't. I'm not guilty of that, not at all. I guess the opposite is underthinking, and you can make a rash decision, without thinking it through. I know a lot of people make decisions with their mouth and the words that they choose to use without thinking about them. So we want to be thoughtful, but you don't want to be stuck in overanalysis that causes a paralysis in the decision-making process, all right? So having the amount of choices, having the amount of time in which to make a choice can add to this indecision factor showing up. But one of the main reasons why decisions can be difficult is there's a fear factor, this fear of the consequence. Well, I hope I make the right decision. Oh, well, what if I make the wrong decision? Well, then something will happen. Something bad will happen. A lot of times, the thing that we're really whether we are willing to admit it or not, the thing is that we are most concerned about, the consequence of our decision making, is looking stupid. Okay, ooh, that was a dumb choice. Why did I do that? What was I thinking? That was stupid. Or being embarrassed or something. So that can lead us sometimes to not make a choice. And that can put us in an even worse position because it's really disempowering. Okay? If you can't make up your mind, if you're indecisive, it does tend to point to at least a perceived sense of lack of power, lack of confidence. And that can be translated from other people into being lack of security, that if you don't even know who you are, if you can't make a decision. Well, how can you make a decision regarding me if you can't even decide what to order for dinner? Okay? And it can lead to an overall sense of wishy-washiness or indecisiveness, that you get in the habit of not being able to make a decision. Then you're racked with fear. And because that's one of the things at the time factor, the more time you have to make a decision, the more you can build it up in your mind, the consequences, the fear of turning left when you should have turned right. Okay, that can really build something up and make it a much harder decision. And you can artificially inflate the consequences. Like, what is this going to mean to me? A lot of times we make a bad choice, even if it comes with some consequences, some negative fallout, people are forgiving. You got to be forgiving with yourself. And there's always the opportunity to choose differently next time, or then decide to make amends or to make it right if you mess something up with this decision that you made. Okay, and this is very primal. This goes to our fight and flight mechanism in our autonomic nervous system. Okay, and it's very primal. It has to do with survival. It goes back to caveman days, probably even earlier, before they even knew what a cave was. And if you see a threat, a danger, well, do you fight it? Stand your ground and fight it? Or do you flee? Do you run the other way with your tail between your legs? Maybe we had tails back then. Or freeze. Freeze is the other part of this primal reaction to something that may or may not be a threat. And this is, and you may fret over it too. So this is very primal indecision making: fight, flight, or freeze. And if you fight and you're stronger than your opponent, well, then you can win. Maybe you can get a meal instead of becoming a meal. If it looks like you're outnumbered with teeth or whatever this creature has, you can run, especially if you can run faster. Deer, antelope, some of these herd animals, that's how they survive, is by flight. They can run faster often than their predator, or at least run fast longer, and their predator will run out of steam before they catch up with them. Or freeze. Freeze is a very strong instinctive response that some animals have because sometimes the predator may only see movement and not really, you might just blend into the background, just freeze, don't say anything, don't breathe, then the danger will pass. Okay, that's great if you're in the jungle. That's great for some very intense survival situations. But the problem is, in our modern life, in civilization, we don't really make some of those survival decisions, although that survival part of us is still very active, and it gets activated when we see this. Well, what's the threat? Well, the threat is being embarrassed, and it'll kill my reputation or something. It's not so much the survival of the body. it's a psychological construct. What's at stake is your reputation, your pride, anything that could be damaged by making what could end up being the wrong decision. All right? So we have all this going on, but we're civilized. We have, well, partially anyway, we've grown out of the jungle and away from the cave. And even though we still carry some of this with us, we do have this other part that we can move into and rely on and draw from, upon which we can make decisions better and with more strength and more, as I should say, decisiveness. Okay, so there are different types of conditions or situations we find ourselves when we are faced with having to make a decision. Now, in an emergency situation, you don't really have that time factor. You can't hem and haw about a lot of different things. Okay, and there may not be very many choices. You may have to act instantly. And the consequences, certainly the consequence of not making a decision, would be very, very bad in an emergency. You have to decide something. Okay? So I think a lot of us in very immediate, very present emergency-ish, it doesn't have to be life or death, but it could be an important decision that needs to be made very, very quickly. Since we don't have this extra time to overthink, we have to rely on another part of our inner life, an intuition, a flash of insight, or just, I don't know where that came from, and I decided to turn left instead of right, and it seemed was the right thing to do. Thank God I did that. We find ourselves in this place where we, that is our thinking, feeling, our inner life, doesn't really get in the way as much with making a decision. Okay? But that's not always the fact. We're not always in an emergency, do or die situation. A lot of times we can be faced with a big decision with a lot of different elements to it. And it can be very complicated and difficult to make a decision, but one must be made. And even if you have to make a big decision, the answer then is to move forward with it. Once you've decided to do this thing, if along the way you learn more about it through the act of carrying this decision out, this choice, making this choice, and following through with it, you might be able to adapt, you might be able to change. It may become irrelevant. Some of the things that were going on that had to do with making a decision, well, should I sell my car or not? I need a car. Well, I could take the bus to work. I don't know what to do. And then somebody gifts you a car, and well, then you can sell your other car, and now you're not going to have any car payments. So it really altered the conditions under which you're having to make a difficult choice or a difficult decision. Okay, so that can always happen, and always be open to that. But at some point, it's better to decide and follow through with that decision, and then work with amending it or changing it as you go. Okay? Now, there can be other decisions that are very contradictory. Okay? Either they're equally weighed, they're equally good, or equally bad, in the sense that maybe, I know in politics, a lot of people say, well, it was the lesser of two evils. First of all, we don't have two choices, even in America with this two-party system. There are other parties. Okay, now they may not be viable, your person may not get elected, but you're deciding not to decide between two undesirable things. Okay? So you have to rely on your value system when it comes to making a decision. Some have conflicting values. Choice A may appeal to some of your values that you hold to be important and true, but it also hurts you in some other ways. And the other decision may be just the opposite, or similar in the sense that, yes, maybe a different set of values it upholds, but it doesn't uphold some of these values. So this does this, but doesn't do that. This does that, but doesn't do this. And it can be very, very difficult, and you can get stuck. Okay. And also, the more thoughtful, and by that, I don't mean compassionate or caring. I mean, the more in general thought you put into things, you have a chance of overthinking when it comes to making a decision. Okay. And again, that depends on the situation. Okay. So the process basically goes like this. There is a choice to be made, a decision that has to be made. There are the different options that you have to weigh. And you take in all the available information. Well, what is it about option A? What is that like? What's this going to cost? How much time is this going to afford me? What are the consequences for other people? And then you do the same thing with option B or option C. And that's really a fact finding. You're not making the decision yet. You're just getting the goods. You're getting the facts and figures about the different options from which you have to choose to make your decision. And that comes into your inner life. And you're going to run those, like data going into a computer, you're going to run those facts into and through your processing power of your inner life. So you can rely on your beliefs about things. Well, I don't believe in that. I don't want to choose that. You're also going to rely on your experience. Anything with your knowledge, whether it's book learning knowledge or it's street smart knowledge that you've picked up along the way, living a life. Well, boy, I've tried this, 10 times, and 9 out of 10 times it didn't work out. Well, then that may not be a choice that you would weigh too heavily because you've had a bad experience or several bad experiences with it. Doesn't necessarily eliminate it because this one could be different, but you also have to rely on that because that's what you have. Now, another element that goes into this, which I think is one of the more important, and also because it's important, it's powerful. Okay, or it's powerful because it's important, or it's important because it's powerful. This power of emotion. Okay, I've talked about William James, who said that when it comes to a choice between the rational, that is your thinking logical part, and the passional part of you, that is your emotional, your visceral, experiential part of you, the passional usually wins out. And that's what happens in a lot of the decisions we make. We can make decisions and decide to do something that logically may not make much sense, but it was an emotional thing. We can do this with purchasing, okay? You can look at the price of something and look at your account and go, this isn't a good idea. This isn't very practical. And then the emotional part kicks in and says, yeah, but you want it. Or wouldn't that be cool? Or, well, you look good with that. So that can really change the complexion of these kind of cold, dry facts and figures that come in. You can energize or vitalize some of them, plus or minus, yes or no, by your emotional. And it can overwrite some of your best laid plans. Okay, so keep that in mind. There's a situation and all the conditions involved with the certain choices and things that you have to decide. There's your whole inner experience with your knowledge and background. And then there's your feelings. So know that those are all going on when you're making a decision. And any one of them can make it difficult, but you have to consider them all and put them all in the right place and proper proportion so you can make this decision. Okay. Now, a lot of times, I think I've been talking about decisions that have consequence or at least in some way affect other people. Actually, most of our decisions and actions, even our speech and thoughts, can have an effect on other people and the environment around us. But often there are decisions that are very personal. It could have to do with personal hygiene, or like I was talking about a purchase that you may make. You maybe alone would suffer the consequences for a poor decision. Of course, financially, if you made a very, very bad decision, it could affect your family and other people if they depend on you for that. But with a personal decision, one that has to do with whether you want to improve your education, go back to school, or if you want to change your hairstyle, or they may seem inconsequential, but those little ones can be big, okay? It's Friday night. Should I go out? Yeah, that would be nice. I could see some friends. I haven't been out in a while. Get me out of the house. But, there's traffic and there's all these people and I don't really have anything to wear. And gosh, what am I going to do? Then you can go, if I stay home, I might regret not going out. Okay, because I don't get invited out every Friday. And here it is. Let's do this. But it'll cost me, cover charge or whatever it is that you're going to. Okay, so this can be, no one's really going to care. I think your friends, maybe if you were invited out, they might care if you show up or not. But these aren't earth-shattering, okay? You're not going to affect your family or really anybody else too much either way, even yourself, whether you go or not. But what can happen is you can have a guilty feeling or a sense of regret later on for having made the wrong decision. And as the song goes, even if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And that's another thing that happens. I was talking about the time factor. Sometimes we can run out the clock. Okay? At some point, a decision has to be made with something. Okay? But if you run out the clock, meaning that if you just let enough time pass, I got to know by Friday. Okay, I'll let you know. And then Saturday, you call them back and, oh, yeah, sorry I didn't get back to you. Yeah, guess it's too late now. And then you don't have to make this decision. That's kind of a cop-out, but it's something we also do. Because, again, decisions are difficult. They can be, and they can become very, very difficult. All right, so what do we do about it? Well, the first thing you can do, and probably the best thing you can do, is to decide to become more decisive. Okay? Tell yourself that. Remind yourself throughout the day, I want to be more decisive. Okay? And you can think about the reasons why. And I was talking about power and confidence, self-confidence, maybe the confidence other people have in you. If you're able to, really, can just make a decision. That's great. They may not actually think that, but I think that vibe, that energy gets out. But if you're constantly wishy-washy and you can't make up your mind, people will recognize that, and they may even say something. Okay? So think of the reasons why you want to be more decisive. That will help energize your decision to become more decisive. Okay? Keep telling yourself, I want to be more decisive. I want to be more clear in the choices that I make. And you have to go through your value system, weigh things out. You may have to reevaluate yourself right now and see, what is important to me? Okay, regarding this decision that may need to be made. Do I really think this way? If we're relying on our experience and our emotions, ask, I've thought this way in the past and I've made decisions based on this knowledge, but am I really that person now? Or am I in this situation now? Okay? Or your feelings, your emotions. You can ask yourself, normally I feel this way when it comes to a decision or a choice that I would have to make, but do I really feel that way about this thing? Okay, just check in and see how your thoughts and your feelings are affecting your ability to make a decision. Because if you change those, that may change your choice, first of all, but it will definitely have an effect on your ability to make a decision, whatever the decision is. Okay? And if the time factor allows for a night's sleep, you can, at least a night's sleep, you can tell yourself before you go to bed, I'm turning this over. I've thought about this all day, can't make up my mind. I'm confused. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm turning it off. I'm turning it over. Ask for a dream or some intuitive insight to come to you in the morning, and you may think about it differently. Okay, this is that overthinking. This puts a stop to that overthinking. If you have that luxury of time, or even if it's an hour, do something else. Do something where you can't be thinking about this decision, and trust that the right answer will come to you. Okay? And remind yourself again that even if you make the wrong choice or a bad decision, you can still do something about it. And often it's worse to not decide, okay, than to make a decision. Then you kick the can down the road or pass it off to somebody else, and that's sort of the cop-out way of not having to decide. All right? And if you are faced, no matter how big, or well, maybe if it's not too big, but if it's not too big, if you're faced with a decision that is really 50-50, okay? They all have plus and minus. There's advantages and disadvantages. Choice A would do this, which is okay. Choice B would do this, and that's okay too. And you're stuck. You're in a quagmire. You can't decide one way or the other. 50-50. You've weighed it with your values, and that's the best you can do. Well, you know what you can do then? Is use the executive decision-making tool, which is a coin, flip it. Give heads to choice A, tails to choice B. Close your eyes, flip the coin, however you do it, and then go with what that is. And don't look back, okay? Even if it later turns out to be wrong, well, at least I made it. Because you can spend more time stuck in indecision than you can maybe even doing the thing that you were deciding whether or not to do. Okay? So give yourself a break. Tell yourself, remind yourself why it's important to be decisive. Make the decision, go with it. If it's wrong, or if it wasn't as great as you thought it would be, decide to make it better, make amends, fix it, solve it. But it's probably better to decide than not to decide most of the times. Okay? So thank you for deciding to listen to this podcast, and I hope you choose to listen again next time here on Living the Inner Life.